Thank you for joining for part 2, discussing Jax Taylor opening up about his 20-year addiction struggle on the Hot Mic podcast with Alex Baskin. To see Brittany's response to Jax going public, go over to part 1. I mentioned this in part 1, but I want to reiterate, I am very proud of Jax for coming out with this. It is a very difficult thing to do, and I do want to give him the praise due to any person who struggles with addiction of any kind, who seeks help. That being said, there were some things that I did have a little bit of an issue with that Jax said on this podcast. Let's start with this clip.
There was an incident. Brittany and I were actually on the way to a doctor's appointment for our son. Her phone was connected to my car, and a man's name came up, and it just triggered me. I did slip after the first incident, and I did take substance the night before, and the next day is always the worst. When you're after this, the next day is the worst. I lost it. I went crazy in the car, yelling. And the worst part about all of this, and this is why I checked myself in, is that my son was in the back seat.
Personally, it does sound like he blames Brittany for his latest relapse, and there's more to further support this.
I found out that Brittany was hooking up with my friend Julian 2 weeks after we separated. 2 weeks. So I knew in my head that she's been definitely texting him prior, because nobody hooks up with somebody that fast, especially a friend of mine. So when I heard that, obviously, and that's was at my low. That's when I was doing all the drinking. Now I amped it up even more. So I was doing a little bit. I was probably doing it maybe a couple times a week. Now I upped it up to 3 to 4 times a week. And now I'm even more in my head. So I'm like, I'm going to call every girl I know. I am going to hurt her. I'm going to literally sleep with whoever I can find.
I'm not coming from a place of judgment. I am coming from a place of just wanting to point this out. Something that's easy to say about someone who has an addiction, I'll put it on to someone who has an addiction to drinking. They're going to find any excuse that they can. For example, they're drinking because the dog is sick and they might pass away. And then they'll find the excuse, I'm drinking because the dog is sick and they're not passing away. There's always an excuse and always a reason. And it still sounds like he is putting a lot of the reason on Brittany and what she did or did not do whenever they chose to separate. One more clip to show you, and then I have one more thing to say.
This is very, very raw of me. You're going to see it's very emotional, and it took a lot out of me. It took a lot out of my wife. We're still going through it. And I just want people to try to be gentle, try to be patient, and try to understand that, addiction is a disease, and it's a very, very, very hard disease. Very hard. So if you can be a little gentle and just show a little grace, I would appreciate that. I understand if you're going to be mad at me. I get it. I would be mad at me too. But just know, please watch the whole season before you really judge me.
I think it could be easily taken that Jax is doing this because he knows he is going to be portrayed in a light that's not good with the season 2 of The Valley coming out soon, which very well may be true. Jax has been portrayed, well, as himself over the years pretty poorly. So I don't think it's totally that. Additionally, I think we can all, as viewers, find a middle ground when it comes to how we take in his behavior that is undoubtedly going to be pretty monstrous this season. We can give him grace, but not an excuse. Personally, I am no Jax Taylor fan, but I can absolutely say I wish him nothing but the best in his recovery, not only for himself, but most importantly for his son, and also for any relationship he has in co-parenting with Brittany. What do you think?